Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Warrior Academy podcast. Today I'm asking the question, are overconfident parents raising self-doubting kids? So studies have shown that children with overconfident parents often lack self-confidence and self-worth. And basically, it typically comes from parents tending to be overly critical and demanding. So parents with high confidence tend to be overly critical and demanding. They set too many rules and regulations, and they praise excessively. And they don't necessarily praise for the right things all the time. And then they overprotect parents. And ultimately, that environment can lead to children feeling helpless, lacking the ability to make decisions and to solve problems on their own. So there's an element of empowerment there as well. And it leads children to compare themselves to others, as well as finding it difficult or finding difficulty in not taking responsibility for their own actions. So it's a really interesting topic, because obviously we want to develop our children into confident adults, and therefore we need to work with confident adults to do that. But what happens when you are confident? What happens to your life and the decisions you make and everything from the balance of that, right? Like, obviously lack of confidence is a negative thing, but is there a huge negative element we're missing out here of overconfidence and how that influences how we raise our children? I think in short, an overconfident parent can lead to a child having difficulty developing their own identity and having low self-esteem. So if you're a particularly confident parent and you're listening to this, or you are husband or wife to a parent who's particularly confident, and some of this is resonating, or even if it's not, but you just find it interesting, there's three things that I would do to be aware of, I think, if you're a confident parent raising children and you want to avoid some of those pitfalls or the downside of overconfidence that I've just mentioned. So the first thing is this focus on allowing your child to make decisions for themselves and take responsibility for their actions. So a good example of that would be when your child's deciding what to wear for school. Let them make their own mind up on that, their own decision. If they want to choose an outfit which obviously isn't appropriate, don't punish them for it. Instead, explain to them why it's not suitable and help them find an alternative. Obviously, you've got different stages of childhood. I know that, different developmental stages. I know that when my children were toddlers, and my son still is, very adamant that today is, it's time to dress like Spider-Man. Other days, he says he wants to dress like a man, so he wants to just wear a shirt. So it's finding the balance, right? I think that there are little ways to give children the ability to make their own decisions. One of the challenging things about that as a parent is that it often then increases the time it takes everything, right? But I often find that children find a way to make that really important. They become very adamant that they want to make their own decisions as they go through these different developmental stages. But I think encouraging that even before they do want to make those decisions, just to kind of test it out and see where they go, and encourage them to make their own decisions, I think has a massive impact. So the next thing I would say is to encourage your child to explore their interests and talents without comparing them to others. So this is a really important exercise or technique or trait, because ultimately it comes down to self-esteem, right? It's a lot of the time when we're working with young people to empower them, it's looking at what they do from a place of, I do this and I look like this and I behave like this because I'm unique and I'm different to other people. And when I look at bullying, one of the things I've always said about bullying is that we typically attract the bullies into our life because of the things that we don't yet love about ourselves. So if you're able to work with your child on this level to explore their interests without comparing themselves to others, they are developing their self-love. If they build their self-love to a higher level, they're less likely to attract bullies into their life. Just a quick shout out to the guys at Shield who manage this podcast, come up with the strategy behind the podcast, help me schedule interviews, as well as do all of the editing and the producing of the podcast. Without them, we wouldn't be able to produce this podcast. If you would like to create your own podcast, I can't recommend the Shield team enough. They have done well over 100 episodes for me over the last few years, and I've been so pleased with the results. So have a look in the description of this video or the podcast episode, and you'll see how to get in touch with them yourself. If your child's interested in playing guitar, you can provide them with, the resources and the guidance to pursue that interest without comparing them to other children who are also playing the guitar. So, if there's something they're interested in but no one else is doing it, that's a great opportunity actually to double down on that one thing which they could be benefiting from. That's a very unique thing that just they do. So the next thing, number 3 on this, is to set a good example by showing moderation and empathy and accountability in your own life. So that's basically modeling, right? Children tend to copy what their parents do. So setting a good example for everything we do is a great way for a child to look up at you and say, that's how I behave. It's the big things, but also the small things that you do. Even the conversations you have at home, or when you're out at a restaurant, or you're out shopping, whatever it is, children are always watching those things, and they behave in the same way. So if you're not polite, they won't be polite, and that's the reality. One of the interesting things about that is, the way my son watches me speak to my wife is how he will later go on in his life speaking to women, and vice versa. The way that my daughter sees me treating my wife is the same way she'll expect to be treated as she grows up and eventually has a partner herself. So a good example of this, setting a good example, is when you're being faced with a difficult decision or a situation, take a step back and try to look at it objectively and calmly rather than just reacting emotionally. When we're talking about empathy, showing empathy towards others is really important, and letting your child see that, and then being prepared to take actions, take responsibility for your actions. It's more important that your child can see that even if you're right or wrong, if you've been wrong, the fact that you have said that you're wrong and you can apologize to them for that shows that you've got empathy and you take control of your actions. And I think that's a massively important thing. So that's it from today's episode. I hope that was interesting. I hope that helped answer the question for you, or at least plant the seed of a bit of an insight into are overconfident parents raising self-doubting kids? Confidence is a double-edged sword. It can work in your favor, and it can also not work in your favor. Being lacking confidence can be really negative in your life, but having too much confidence can show up in lots of issues with your children. And ultimately, the studies have shown that children with overconfident parents often lack self-confidence. And so that's something we need to be mindful of, I think, when we are trying to develop our child's character. Hope that was useful, and make sure you subscribe. If you're enjoying the podcast, it'd be great if you could rate and review, and so I can get this out to more and more people who can benefit from various insights about character development, building resilience, bullying, or even martial arts in the Warrior Academy. So that's it from me, and I look forward to seeing you next time. I really hope you enjoyed today's Warrior Academy podcast episode. We're going to keep creating these episodes because I know that so many parents find them useful, or get insights or get ideas about how to develop their child's character. But it all comes down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration. So if you want to get a deep insight into the levels of confidence your child has, the level of concentration they have, or the level of conduct they have, so that you can actually put a score next to it and then work towards increasing those scores like we do in the Warrior Academy, then I'd love to invite you to fill in the Breakthrough Area Assessment. It takes about 5 minutes of your time, and you will get a personalized PDF report on your child's 3 C's. To access the Breakthrough Area Assessment and find out your child's 3 C's score, all you need to do is go to www.breakthrougharea.com.